believe I've heard you in the past sort of say that you don't love the language around a not-for-profit. Tell us more.
It's not like that. I hate the term per se. It is the mental models associated with it. What is it about the tax status of a business that somehow determines the degree of excellence required in order to do that problem solving and creating value?
They say you can't be what you can't see.
Not only is it helpful to be able to see it, but you want to be empowered to dream.
So what's your dream for Harlem Children's Home?
The ultimate dream is that we don't have to exist. We have a generation of data that proves that this model works. And we believe we have the vaccine of poverty.
Welcome to Mistakes Over Failure. I'm Dr. Christine Crawford.
And I'm Debbie Carew. We're filming this week from Chicago, and we are really excited to bring a special guest to you today.
Hi, I'm Kwame Owusu-Kesse, the proud CEO of Harlem Children's Home.
Well, welcome, Kwame. We are thrilled to have you today.
Happy to be here.
And Debbie's going to start you off with 5 quick questions.
All right.
Excellent. I'll start with the easy one. Cats or dogs?
Neither.
Wow.
We've never had a neither.
Neither?
So I'm allergic to cats.
Okay.
My girls are allergic to both cats and dogs. We had a dog, even though hyperallergenic, still had allergies. So neither right now.
No goldfish?
No goldfish. No pets.
All right. Humans. We'll go with humans. Okay. I like it. Sunshine or rain?
Sunshine.
All day long.
Yeah.
All day long.
Indeed.
We've had 1 or 2 guests that have said rain.
Yeah.
And we're almost taken aback when people say rain. Nature versus nurture?
Nurture.
Okay.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
And then sports or creative endeavors?
Sports and creative endeavors.
Oh, so we've got a neither and we've got an ands. Tell us more. So,
A couple things. I view myself as a former athlete and also a creative now. So most of my life, all types of sports, whether it's basketball, football, track, volleyball, soccer. And in many ways, it was a passport to a whole new world for me. I didn't grow up in the best circumstances, and in many ways, sports was the great equalizer. Very much honed in on basketball, was pretty decent. In high school, we won a state championship in Massachusetts. I played JV basketball at Harvard in college, and then also upon graduation, played in a famous street ball tournament called Rigor in Harlem. And then unfortunately had a knee injury, which ended my basketball career. And as a creative, I come from a family of creatives. Dance is the big medium, but for me, I've been a professional DJ for 19 years. And in many ways, that's my creative outlet. That's how I feel whole. So having both the sports and creative side is very important for me.
Well, so I guess we've talked about your DJ journey. So could you talk about your other professional journey?
Okay.
to get us to Harlem Children's Zone?
So a little bit about my journey. I think to understand how I got to the Harlem Children's Zone, it's probably important to understand my life journey because it puts into perspective why I think I have one of the best jobs on the planet. And so I say that my story is similar to the story of the young people that we serve in Harlem. Grew up in tough circumstances, extreme poverty, single parent household. Both of my parents had immigrated from Ghana in the late 70s, early 80s. They were never married. And it was tough. You know, there was domestic violence, extreme poverty, teenage pregnancy, high school dropout, all of that existed in my family in one shape or form. But my mom played bingo at a local elementary school called Venerini Academy. And because the nuns fell in love with her in my personal journey, they gave me a scholarship. That scholarship put me on an education trajectory with high quality academics, enrichments, and exposures. But I would say, most importantly, surrounded me with adults who believed in my potential. The nuns would say this, and this was in the 90s. They were like, Kwame, we think you're going to be the first Black president of the United States. And back then, that felt like science fiction. But the nuns believed it. And there's a real power about having a belief in a young person. Yeah. And there's a battery that's put in your back. And so I really thought that sky was the limit for me. And from Venerini Academy, That led to another scholarship to a local area high school, St. John's, and ultimately led for me to be one of the first in my family to attend college. I graduated Harvard College with a degree in economics, and like most 21-year-olds, didn't know what the heck I wanted to do with my life, so I said, where are my friends going? And that introduced me to the wonderful world of Wall Street investment banking. So I began my career as an investment banking analyst at Morgan Stanley. And I love my time banking. Harvard didn't have finance as undergrad. And so in many ways, I viewed my time at banking as like paid business school. And the irony is, it was my time at Morgan Stanley that I learned of the Harlem Children's Zone. So much so that they sponsored me for a year. Morgan Stanley has a program called the Morgan Stanley Ambassador Program. It first started with 9/11 and their way of making a donation to a high-performing social impact organization is paying the salary of a high-performing analyst. And so I was fortunate enough to be selected from a global applicant pool, and I had a choice. Typically, the placement would be at the Morgan Stanley Children's Hospital, and my year, I got to choose between the Children's Hospital and this organization called Harlem Children's Zone, because my president at the time was serving on the board of HCZ. I knew nothing of it. I was like, let me try this out. Let me speak to who the leader is and see if there's a vibe there. And so they set up a 20-minute interview with a gentleman named Jeffrey Canada, who I came to learn through meeting him. Was like, who is this guy? He's like a modern day Martin Luther King mixed with Malcolm X, mixed with like, will you be my dad? Like, I fell in love. And so that 20-minute interview turned into an hour-and-a-half love fest. I said probably one-sided on my end, but it was special and it changed my life. And so I did a year fellowship working alongside Jeff. And I always said the hardest thing I did that year wasn't the financial analysis or strategic planning. It was coaching basketball. Because I learned very quickly it was bigger than teaching my scholars the fundamentals of sport. It was more so, Coach Kwame, can you walk me home because I'm not good on that block? Right. So when we think about the maze of violence that our young people had to navigate and how they looked at the adults as their protectors, as their stakeholders, I fell deeper in love because that was very much my story. After that year fellowship, I always had the intention of going back to business school. But it was the time at Harlem Children's Zone that had me apply to do a double master's back at Harvard, business and public policy. I wanted, from an academic perspective, to explore this intersection of public and private sectors. Because at the time you hear buzzwords like impact investing, social entrepreneurship. So I didn't know, was there a career for me at this nexus? Would I go back to the for-profit sector and do philanthropic things on the side or vice versa? And then during my third year in school, Jeff Canada gave me a call saying, we want you to come back. I said, absolutely, sign me up. I had no idea how much money I would make. I had no idea what my job title would be. But for me, it didn't matter because it was about mission. And when I reflect back on my own personal journey, it was very much the luck of bingo that changed my life trajectory. And I wanted to remove luck from the equation entirely and make that the norm for tens and thousands of young people in Central Harlem and millions across the country. So for me, this work is extremely personal. It's not about charity or feeling good about myself. It's about unlocking the great potential that exists in our community.
I think they're very lucky to have you, but I also am envious that you found this incredible thing that lights you up. Yeah. And it's, how many years have you been there now?
Oof, I first joined in 2008. And so from 2008, then 3 years at grad school and came back in 2012. So it's been a long time and it's almost my entire professional career, but I wouldn't change a thing. It's been special.
So you came in after a legend. Right?
Indeed.
And so how did he help prepare you for this moment? And how did your time with him help prepare you for this moment?
And so, for clarity, I'm the third CEO of Harlem Children's Zone. So when I came back in 2012, Jeff was CEO. Okay. He had a COO, Ann Williams Isom, who became CEO when he stepped down in 2014. I became her COO, and then I became CEO in 2020. All throughout, Jeff was by my side. I always say it's a sign of intelligence to ask for help, not a sign of weakness. Mm-hmm. And Jeff, for me, was like the truth teller. He's Yoda. He's dad for real. And he was very intentional in his preparation of me. I call him one of my mirror bearers. He is not afraid to tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. And it allows me to see how I'm showing up in the world. I've made a ton of mistakes, and it's been his wisdom and guidance that has helped me navigate difficult situations, personally or professionally. And to be able to have someone who has poured so much into you. Jeff could be CEO right now.
Yeah.
He understood that, particularly in our space, a lot of times founders who stay on too long can negatively impact long-term sustainability for an organization. And so he intentionally groomed and prepared me to be able to one day serve as CEO. And in many ways, I've taken the baton and I'm running with it, understanding I'm carrying his legacy and the legacy of our community.
I have so many questions, but one of the ones I'm so curious about. So Mr. Canada sounds like incredible mentor. Do you have people that you now look at and you are that to them?
Oh man, I would not ever pretend that I'm the Jeff candidate to someone, but for me, I feel a deep responsibility to pay it forward. And growing up, Jeff was one of the first professionals that I experienced that was of an older generation that I could feel and touch. But as a young person, I had peer mentors. And to this day, that still remains where we're mentoring each other and we're not letting title and ego get in the way, as opposed to we all have various lived experiences. And for me, it's important to have a level of transparency about all of the challenges that we face as young leaders in this space. And so for me, I try to make myself available for our young people, for our staff, for my friends and family, to whomever, and others play that role for me. So I will never pretend like I have all of the answers, but I have experience. And I think it's important to be able to have conversations like this, to be able to bring light, shed light on his experiences, because as you all know, leadership is extremely lonely. And in some ways, it feels like there is this rites of passage that leaders go through, and they have to step on landmines in order to learn the hard lessons. And so if there's a way in which I can play a role that can make that path easier for leaders that come behind me, I feel like I have a responsibility to do so.
It reminds me, I've heard the saying, I'm sure you've heard it too, where they say you can't be what you can't see.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And it's funny, given the respective roles, and I can make assumptions about the first that we've had to play, not only is it helpful to be able to see it, but you want to be empowered to dream. And in some instances, if you're blazing new pathways, you might not have been able to see it, but you want to know that you're supported by a community that can help you achieve that. So in many ways, the seeing it is the actual dreaming and then manifesting that into reality.
But I do think part of that burden, though, is that you also get tired.
Right? Like, big facts.
So what do you do, right, when you get tired? Because not even talking about your travel schedule, but this desire to be present for folks in your life and work and DJing and...
So the honest answer is I am tired all of the time. Okay. My closest friends know, they're like, how you doing? I say, I'm tired as hell, is a common refrain. And the older I get, the more introverted I have become, which is very shocking to folks who've known me in my younger years. Like, okay, how are you an introverted DJ? That doesn't make any sense. And I have learned that I need spaces of quietness and nothingness. Like, I don't want to be around my kids, not my wife, no, and I will just sit in silence and being able to have the transparent conversations with my wife. And she knows that, like, I need alone time to recharge. I'm also an avid Boston Celtics fan. And so most times they give me joy. Sometimes they give me heartache, but that's a good way to replenish energy. And music and DJing. And so what I love about DJing is I have to be focused at the crowd in that moment, right? I'm not dad, I'm not CEO, I'm not husband. I will get booed if I'm not stepping up to a plate. So I love that creative challenge and using a different part of my brain. But I have a community that I'm surrounded with who really loves me. And they pour into me, and they know when they can see that I'm approaching burnout or I'm tired or I'm stressed. And they call me out on it. And it's important to have that community of support, particularly in those moments of exhaustion, right? It is exhausting. It's the stress of work. It's a crazy travel schedule constantly, whether it's speaking or fundraising or what have you. The burnout of the 1,000 decisions that you have to make within a day. And I always say, I have 3 goals in life. I want to be a great husband. I want to be a great father, and I want to be a great leader. And the reality is, it's really hard to be all 3 at the same time. And so how do you figure out the right type of alignment between the 3, understanding there are trade-offs, and how are you being intentional in those moments to be able to know when you're falling short or what you need in order to replenish when you feel like your cup is running low? That's just my honest answer.
Well, one of the things that I think sometimes frustrates me a little bit when we talk about like blue zone and people talk about aging and wellness. So Debbie knows I helped take care of my grandmother till she was 109 when she passed.
Wow.
Right? And people talk about blue zones and they talk about eating and exercise, but they also people don't focus on the community part and how that plays in longevity. And so I think one of the things that you may not be giving yourself credit for is the community piece. Because I think the folks that live a long time are not ever by themselves.
Well, that's right. It's funny. It's even in our work, one of the greatest predictors of economic mobility is social capital. And that's not just from a financial perspective. To your point, it is when you're in a community of love and connectivity, it has so many benefits that play out throughout one's lifetime. And having that connectivity, particularly in later stages in life, is essential. So I appreciate that reminder.
That makes so much sense. I've never actually heard someone say that out loud in terms of economic mobility, but it makes so much sense.
Absolutely.
Right? It's...
Think about, this is the essence of YPO, right? Like, so often we navigate leadership, or we think we have to navigate leadership because all of the challenges are so unique to us. And then you come in to GLC and you see 1,300 other leaders that have the same exact problems and pathways. And there's just like a lightness that you feel. You feel seen. You feel like you can be vulnerable without judgment. You have community. And that's part of the power and the magic of YPO. And I think it is the essence of that social capital, not in a transactional way, but in, I'm here for you. We are going through similar things, and we can do great things together.
We're not alone.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Can we pivot to, I have to ask the question because as I said to Kwame when we walked in, I feel like I know you because I had the luxury of taking part in the Harvard Business School case about one of the key decisions that you had to make as a leader. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your journey as it relates to the case?
So a little bit about the Harlem Children's Zone, because I think it's important to understand the context of the organization, and then we can dive a little bit about the Harvard Business School case. And so the mission of the organization is breaking cycles of intergenerational poverty from birth to and through college, all the way to career. And at the core of what we do is education. We have 2 charter schools, but we have a whole host of wraparound services, literally starting from our baby college, where moms can be pregnant to age 3. We have a pre-K that serves 3 and 4-year-olds, 2 charter schools, a whole host of after-school programs for students who attend traditional public school, which all converges at the college age, where we have a college success office. So everyone is assigned a college counselor from Harlem Children's Zone, because it's one thing to get to college, it's another thing to get through college. And a whole host of community supports, whether it's health and wellness programming, evening program. Yes, we'd have cards and cafes and bingo. But it's this idea of surrounding a young person with a net of services woven together so tightly so that no one can fall through the seams. And so the best way to describe it, now I'm a parent, and if you all have the privilege of caring for a young person, either as a parent or a sibling or a mentor, you know that there isn't anything that you want to do to make sure that that young person is put on the pathway to social and economic mobility and can transition to independent and healthy adulthood. And so we ensure that at each stage of development, a young person has access to high quality education, academics, supports, and a community that believes in the potential, very much like the community that believed in me and helped me achieve the quote unquote success that I've been able to gain. So that's the essence of the Harlem Children's Zone. Now with the Harvard Business School case, which is, it's one of the most flattering things to be a former Harvard Business School student, now to be a case protagonist. And it's a part of the mandatory curriculum of all first-year students. And so I feel like this burden, but this honor of that. Every graduate of Harvard Business School now learns of the story of the Harlem Children's Zone.
Amazing.
And so the case centers, and as most cases, there's a CEO or a leader that's a case protagonist faced with a daunting decision. And the context of the case was, it's COVID. It just hit. It is ravaging our communities. And at the time, New York is at the epicenter. I just became CEO in 2020, right? Perfect timing. And so you have a new leader navigating a new context. And now there's a significant opportunity to go national. And the question is, do you take this opportunity or not? And part of the case is navigating all of the challenges personally, professionally, that come with a new leader placed in a position that seems like an impossible decision that could have high reward. $100 million was at stake, but certainly high risk to the organization and my family.
Are you risk adverse or are you a risk taker?
I'm a calculated risk taker. I don't think you can accomplish a lot of great things without taking risk, but you can't take risk irresponsibly. And so I don't try to overanalyze, but for as much of the information I can get, try to make smart bets so that if the goal is not hit, we still advance closer to our target than we were previously. So I'm a calculated risk taker.
Like it. That's actually probably a good thing if you were an analyst on Wall Street.
Indeed.
I think we like to hear that.
Indeed. But there's some stories I can share about some of the different type of risks I've taken on Wall Street that have stuck with me to this day.
So what's your dream for Harlem Children's Zone?
What is my dream for Harlem Children's Zone? The ultimate dream is that we don't have to exist because we were successful in creating the model that is being replicated all across the globe for communities that are often left in the margins and forgotten about. And right now is a momentous opportunity for us. We used to say that this was one of the greatest social experiments. But for us now, this is not an experiment. We have a generation of data that proves that this model works. Like, we believe we have the vaccine of poverty. And therefore, we have a responsibility to make sure that we are codifying our best practices and sharing them with any and everybody. And so that's why I say I have the best job in the world, because I get to pull from all of the different aspects of my life, whether it's my time on Wall Street, my time at Harvard, what I've learned being developed at Harlem Children's Zone, and trying to be innovative in our strategic problem solving, because these are complex challenges that we're trying to face. And I want to be able to use my platform to be able to shed a light on the intersectionality, right? Too often we like to say this is government, social sector, private sector, as opposed to like, no, this is business. And we're all trying to figure out creative ways to solve very complex problems. Otherwise, we're leaving impact on the table if we're taking siloed approaches. And so my hope is that the Harlem Children's Zone gets viewed as an example of a center of business excellence and lays out the blueprint for how to ensure that millions of young people get to achieve their dreams.
So well said. That was one of the things I wanted to ask you about is I believe I've heard you in the past sort of say that you don't love the language around a not-for-profit. Tell us more.
It's not like that. I hate the term per se. It is the mental models associated with it. In my experience, there is a lower set of expectations on the degree of excellence that operate in nonprofits that I think is unfounded. In many ways, the challenge with the term, one, it's deficit framing, right? To begin to label something by what it is not, you're already at a deficit. And as I just said, I think we are doing great work, and that we have to shift the mental model around what is required. And so in all of my experiences, whether again on Wall Street or at HBS, all of those lessons play out in my day-to-day decision-making. And what I have learned is that the essence of business is problem-solving and value creation. It just so happens that in nonprofit, the profit is reinvested back in mission, where in for-profit, those profits are distributed to shareholders. But what is it about the tax status of a business that somehow determines the degree of excellence required in order to do that problem solving and creating value? And the world does a really good job of ascribing value to financial terms, whether it is price, market cap, enterprise value, things of that nature. But that's only one form of capital. There's human capital, there's social capital. And so the irony around the terminology that we use, whether it is nonprofit or impact investing or servant leadership, is there's good intentions by the modifiers, but when you include the modifiers, it then now relegates it to a lesser than, and the default becomes not business with nonprofit and for-profit. You have nonprofit and business. It's not leadership, it's servant leadership, right? And so there needs to be a new taxonomy because that impacts the talent that is attracted to the field, impacts the type of resources. And so it's my hope that given my cross-sectoral background, that I can shift the mental models about what is required to do this work in earnest and understand that we are all a part of a spectrum that is the architecture of value. And if we start thinking about it in those terms, I think you unlock a different type of innovation to problem solving. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so the theme for this season is the future of leadership, right? And so if you could wave a magic wand, and so nonprofit no longer, like as a term, does not exist. And so just business leaders, be it they be mission-minded or profit-minded or both, right? What do you think the future leaders will need, and what do you think it should look like?
Future leaders need to be conversant in all of the forms of capital and creating value in order to be successful in the world. If you think about even from a commercial perspective, what are the new opportunities, whether it's in climate or health tech or ed tech or fintech, there's untapped markets of future customers. It's understand, we saw what happened during the pandemic. School shut down in this country, the economy shut down. The most complex problems are all interconnected. And so the future of leadership is understanding that, one, leadership begins the moment you take responsibility for someone else. And it's understanding that the stakes are human. So if you can lead in this intersectional mindset and being able to leverage the best practices from all over, there's so much tremendous opportunity that is available.
What is your leadership style?
Oh, it's a great question. I have 1,500 employees at the Harlem Children's Zone, and I'm constantly trying to think about how my leadership style is evolving. At first, and I gotten feedback around this, right? I'm a nerd at heart, so how I learn is through questioning. But I didn't have the self-awareness of, again, think of all of the brands that are associated with me. And now I'm asking 1,000 questions that felt like you were being put on a firing squad. And so I think how I've evolved as a leader is understanding, one, that listening is probably one of the most important tools in a communication toolkit. Two is, as a leader, wanting to be able to be transparent and vulnerable. Demystifying this ideal of perfection as opposed to, I make mistakes every day. I ask for help every single day. Now, you need to know the difference between a consequential mistake and a learning mistake, but mistakes nonetheless. How do I role model being a holistic being, pouring into myself, being a family man, being clear about what my values are, and how I get to bring my whole self to our professional spaces is a really important thing for me to role model. I've learned that you have real power as a leader. And that's not to be abused as to, execute on any of your whims that you have, but it is understanding the responsibility that comes with that power. And ultimately, leadership is not about position yourself over others, right? It's about removing the barriers so that others can flourish. And that's the approach that I try to take. I'm a partner. I don't want to ever feel like an interaction with me felt like an abuse of power or privilege of authority. It's recognizing that I sit in a position of privilege, and therefore I have more accountability to make sure I'm creating the spaces for others to be their full selves, and understanding that no matter what role you play, everybody has something of value to contribute. And that's the approach that I take.
Well, thank you. This has been amazing.
Thank you.
We are grateful that you made time for us and that we now are part of your community.
I appreciate it.
We're coming for a tour.
I love it. You come through whenever you're in New York. I got you. Right. Just grateful for the time, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.